December 3rd, 1946. Pier 7, Brooklyn. Lucky Luciano stood at the ship's railing in handcuffs, flanked by federal marshals. Below on the dock, FBI agents watched with satisfaction. They'd finally done it. Removed the most dangerous mobster in America from American soil forever. Lucky's conviction had been overturned as part of a deal with the U.S. government. He'd helped military intelligence during World War II, providing waterfront security and connections in Sicily for the Allied invasion. In exchange, his sentence was commuted. But there was a catch. Immediate deportation to Italy. No appeals, no delays. Lucky would never set foot in America again. The FBI believed they'd won. They'd dismantled Lucky's physical presence, cut him off from his empire, made him powerless. They were wrong. Because standing on that same dock, watching the ship prepare to depart, was Meyer Lansky, Lucky's closest friend, his financial architect, the man who understood money better than anyone in organized crime. As the ship's horn blew, Meyer made brief eye contact with Lucky. No words needed to be spoken. They'd spent the last 6 months preparing for this moment. But just to be certain, as federal agents turned away, Meyer mouthed 4 words Lucky could read from the deck. "We already moved it." Lucky nodded once, the slightest acknowledgement. What the FBI didn't know, what they wouldn't discover for years, was that Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky had just executed the most sophisticated financial operation in criminal history. They'd moved $300 million out of the United States, hidden it in accounts the government would never find, created a financial network so complex, so international, that it would fund organized crime for the next 3 decades. And they'd done it right under the FBI's nose. To understand what Lucky and Meyer did, you need to understand what the government thought was happening in 1946. When Lucky went to prison in 1936, the FBI assumed his financial empire would collapse. They froze accounts, seized assets, watched his known associates. But they made one critical mistake. They assumed Lucky's money was in his name. It wasn't. Meyer Lansky had spent a decade building a financial infrastructure so sophisticated that even today, forensic accountants can't fully trace it. Shell corporations, offshore accounts, legitimate businesses masking illegal profits. Lucky's money wasn't in one place. It was everywhere and nowhere. When Lucky made his deal with the government in 1945, help with the war effort in exchange for release, he and Meyer knew deportation was coming. They had 12 months to prepare. What they did in those 12 months was extraordinary. January 1946. Meyer Lansky began systematically moving money out of U.S. banks, not all at once. That would trigger attention. Slowly, carefully, through legitimate business transactions. Meyer owned pieces of dozens of companies, hotels, casinos, restaurants, import-export businesses. He used these companies to transfer money internationally. A hotel in Miami would purchase furniture from a company in Havana. The furniture would arrive, but the payment would be inflated by 400%. The excess money would sit in Cuban banks. An import business in New York would buy textiles from a Swiss company. The textiles existed, but the price was fraudulent. Millions moved to Switzerland, over and over. Hundreds of transactions, each individually small enough to avoid scrutiny. Together, they represented a fortune. By December 1946, Meyer had moved approximately $300 million, equivalent to over $4 billion today, into accounts in Cuba, Switzerland, and the Bahamas. The FBI was watching Meyer, but they were watching for criminal activity. They didn't recognize sophisticated financial engineering, but moving the money was only half the plan. The other half was making sure Lucky could still access and control it from Italy. Meyer created a system of couriers, trusted men who would travel between New York, Havana, and Naples carrying messages. Not money, messages, instructions, decisions, orders. Lucky would communicate through these couriers. Meyer would execute the instructions in America. The money would flow, the organization would function, and the government would have no idea Lucky was still in control. But there was one more element to the plan. Something so audacious, the FBI never saw it coming. February 1947, 3 months after Lucky's deportation. Meyer Lansky traveled to Havana, Cuba. Officially, he was there on vacation. Actually, he was there to meet Lucky Luciano, because Lucky hadn't stayed in Italy. The deportation agreement said he couldn't return to the United States. It said nothing about other countries. Lucky had moved to Havana, 90 miles from Florida, close enough to oversee operations, far enough to avoid U.S. jurisdiction. And in Havana, Lucky and Meyer ran the largest criminal empire in the world from a hotel suite at the Hotel Nacional. The FBI eventually discovered Lucky was in Cuba and pressured the Cuban government to deport him back to Italy. But by then, the financial infrastructure was complete. Lucky could run things from anywhere. Here's what makes this story remarkable. The FBI spent years trying to figure out how Lucky maintained control after deportation. They investigated, wiretapped, surveilled. They never found the money. In 1951, the Kefauver Committee, a Senate investigation into organized crime, called Meyer Lansky to testify. Senator Estes Kefauver asked Meyer directly, "Mr. Lansky, how much money did Lucky Luciano take out of the United States before his deportation?" Meyer's answer, "I have no knowledge of Mr. Luciano's finances. You were his closest associate for 20 years. I knew him socially. I don't know anything about his money." The committee had no evidence, no paper trail, no proof. Meyer walked out of that hearing a free man, and the $300 million remained hidden. Years later, in the 1970s, after both Lucky and Meyer were dead, a former FBI agent admitted in an interview, "We knew Luciano and Lansky moved money. We knew it was substantial. But we could never prove where it went. They'd created something we'd never seen before. A truly international criminal financial network. By the time we understood what they'd built, it was too late to stop it." That network funded the expansion of organized crime into Las Vegas. It financed casino operations in Havana before Castro. It supported mafia operations in Europe. All of it traced back to those 4 words Meyer whispered on the dock. We already moved it. But here's the deepest part of this story. Lucky and Meyer's financial system became the template for modern money laundering. Shell corporations, offshore accounts, layered transactions, legitimate businesses masking illegal profits. Every technique organized crime uses today to hide money was pioneered by Meyer Lansky in 1946. The FBI thought they were deporting a gangster. They were actually creating a blueprint. Because Lucky Luciano understood something the government didn't. Physical presence is optional. Financial control is everything. Lucky lived in Italy from 1947 until his death in 1962. He never returned to America, but his influence never diminished. Meyer visited him regularly. Couriers brought messages, decisions were made. Money flowed. The commission Lucky founded in 1931 continued to operate under his guidance, even from Naples, even from exile. When Lucky died of a heart attack at Naples Airport in 1962, the FBI finally believed they were free of him. But the system he and Meyer built outlived them both. Meyer Lansky died in 1983. The FBI estimated his personal fortune at over $300 million. They could prove he had $57,000 in a single bank account. The rest? Vanished. Hidden in the same network he'd built for Lucky. December 3rd, 1946. A moment the FBI thought was their victory. The deportation of Lucky Luciano, the end of his empire. But standing on that dock, Meyer Lansky knew the truth. We already moved it. 4 words that meant the game was already over. The money was gone. The system was in place. Lucky Luciano didn't lose his empire that day. He internationalized it. The FBI watched a ship sail away, carrying a man in handcuffs. They didn't see the invisible empire sailing with him. An empire built on numbers, accounts, and the genius of Meyer Lansky. That empire never died. It evolved, adapted, became the foundation of modern organized crime finance. All because 2 men understood that real power isn't about territory, it's about money. And money, unlike men, can be anywhere.